Galien, the toughest Dream Warrior we've found and then some, largely because we can't just walk away and his attacks really keep up the pressure. As with all Dream Warriors, once again his health varies depending on your nail upgrades. First, the Whirling Scythe, and second, the Dream Scythe. For the entire battle, Galien and his weapon will move practically independently of each other, with Galien just sort of floating where he will while the scythe homes in on the knight, bouncing every time it hits the floor or wall. You might look at it ricocheting around and think that, like the Dung Defender, the corner would be safe from it, but that's gonna be a no-go unless you want to get completely shredded at the edge of a buzzsaw. Nope, its homing is strong, but it also travels with a lot of momentum, so dodging it is going to be about moving as much as possible and dashing beneath it between bounces so that it flies overhead. You get a moment to breathe every 9th ground bounce while Galien holds still and revs it up again. So if you're really struggling, I recommend counting the bounces so you can take advantage of the downtime to heal. That's not to mention Galien himself, who floats in a pretty sporadic pattern, and often gets close enough to the ground that his own hitbox becomes dangerous. Now, having 2 hitboxes careening around the arena at once, each with very different movement patterns, can already be quite a pain to dodge. Which is why we're going to add more with the Dream Scythe. He will perform this attack once when he's at 70% HP, and again at 40%, and each one stays a part of the battle permanently. Luckily, their movement is much slower, and much more predictable than the Whirling Scythe. Not to mention that they don't home in on you, but the sheer amount of things to look out for in the fight's final phase can be an awful lot to deal with. Which is why the game plan here is going to be a little bit cruder than usual. The biggest issue with this fight is that the projectiles are all pretty straightforward to dodge if you're focusing exclusively on them, but eventually you're gonna have to crack down and get your hits on Galien. And the longer you wait to get that done, the more likely all these spinning death wheels are going to form some unavoidable formation. So past the first phase, a slow and steady approach is essentially going to result in you taking just as much damage as a reckless one would. So essentially, our plan here is just to rush Galien down and hang the consequences. Unleash spells, equip charms that give you extra masks, do whatever you gotta do. Galien is the only Dream Warrior we've fought so far who neither teleports nor suffers significant knockback from our nail, which is why this whole blitzkrieg approach is viable. Sorry it's not the most elegant strategy this time around, but short of just react to the projectiles faster, this is genuinely the most consistent approach I can offer. Now, it seems Galien doesn't realize that he's dead, but I can think of one way to remind him. So like the man says, we are going to be going at this pretty clumsily, but don't be too hasty about starting the fight, because our whole strategy will be made a little bit easier, as I said, by having more hearts and more damage to take, and what better way to get some than with a very convenient Lifeblood Cocoon, giving us 3 extra hits for the fight ahead. Obviously going to be important for our strategy, since we're about to go as reckless as we can. Have at ye! At 650 HP, Galien is much easier now than he was before, because we have all kinds of new abilities. One being the Abyss Shriek is extremely effective against him. The Abyss Shriek is so effective on Galien because unlike many of the other Dream Warriors, he is not nearly as affected by knockback, so he has to basically just sit there and hold all the damage you can pour into him with it. So, the way this fight is going to go is more or less the same as I recommended, but now we can actually take him down so fast that it doesn't really become a battle of attrition and just dealing as much damage as we can before we take it, but rather dealing as much damage as we can before we take damage. At least ideally. Obviously, that's not how it's going for me in this Ascended fight, but we did still scrape out the win there. So Radiant is not, as far as Galien, it's not about being careful, it's about being extremely fast. We're going to use all the tools at our disposal here, starting with getting a couple of Cyclone Slashes on him because we want to use these relatively easy first phase before he summons in anything else to build up some soul, and then once he starts bringing in the projectiles, we can start just wailing on him with the Abyss Shrieks. Oh, I was pretty close there. Nice! Alright, I misjudged the spacing there terribly. Having the Shade Cloak is, of course, alright, nice. I was gonna say, having the Shade Cloak makes dodging his club way easier, because essentially we can dodge through it whether it's up in the air or on the ground, and it makes manipulating its momentum to our advantage much, much simpler. Alright, I think this might be one where we gotta use our Overcharm set, just to make all things a little bit easier as far as building up our soul. It's gonna make it easier since I'm not gonna have to be as gutsy in the first phase, just building up soul, and then we're gonna have more to expend on him in the latter phases. And I will fully admit, I haven't been using the Cyclone Slash nearly as much as I know it's possible to. I feel it's probably the most situational of all of the nail arts, but in this situation, the fact that each individual hit does count as a hit for all of the soul that you can build up is a pretty nice advantage. So this is one fight where I definitely recommend at least opening with it, even if you're not, gonna be using it too much. I'll fully admit the strategy I'm recommending is a little reckless, perhaps, and terrible. No, but I still think it's more consistent than just trying your best to dodge everything that he throws at you. He just ends up having so much projectile force, so much presence on the arena at any given time, that just straight up avoiding all four of the things moving around and paying attention to all of them is not really reasonable for the human mind. But if you can do it, definitely more powerful. Power to you. Nope. Yikes. There we go. Alright, not too bad. Almost as many tries as Collector, but each one is lightning fast, so we nailed it. Alright, I know that one was rough, but thanks for watching anyway. If you want to see me struggle likewise with every single other challenge in the game, it's going to be in the playlist in the top left corner. Next up, we're not out of the dark just yet. We're going to go after No Eyes.